Another hour at the ready. Sergeant, why are we up here sticking our heads up if there's no enemy attack? We're just targets for snipers like this. Do I look like a savant? I don't have explanations beamed into my head for every order I get. I heard the klaxon same as you did, and now we're all here. Besides the artillery, nothing's shooting at us though, so unless you're unlucky and get shot first, don't worry about the snipers. And have you ever seen a Tazat sniper hit their target? Well, they only have to hit once. Wouldn't they shoot officers in higher ranks like yourself first? They would if they could tell who they were. Didn't you think there's a reason why officers and such wear the same field gear as everyone else? It's also why you don't salute anyone in the field, because if a sniper sees you salute someone, guess who gets shot first? But unless I eat shrapnel, I think I'm safe. Not like a sergeant is the highest priority for snipers.
No, they really aren't. How are we all then, gentlemen? Full steamer doing okay?
She's dead.
Oh.
The field hospital got hit by artillery. They brought their guns out from under the shields to shell our back lines, then rolled them back under heavy anti-air defences when air support finally arrived.
I'm aware. She's not on the system as deceased, though. Well, now she is. Carry on.
Sir, if I may ask, what are we doing? The alarm only goes off when the Tazat are coming at us, but we've been looking at an empty field for an hour.
It's not time for you to know just yet. Just be glad it isn't an attack. Last attack cost 38,000 lives across this entire line. We're still fixing what little mechs we have left from last time, too, so an armoured assault at this point would just about finish us off.
What do you mean? We've held this line before against tanks with no heavy support.
Last time, this line was not looking so sparsely defended. Last time I walked this trench, there was on average an Arisian every 0.237 metres. This time, it's every 1.2 metres on average, which is a decrease of 3.24324324334 Arisians per metre on average. This means on average, the number of Arisians guarding the trenches has decreased by 69.166667%. Considering that the attack you mentioned before caused several minor breakthroughs, allowing shock infantry access to your trenches which cost about 1,000 lives for taking each trench lost, that's 8,000 casualties, then another attack would result in an increase of breakthroughs by the aforementioned percentage. Statistically speaking, of course. Without the numbers to retake the trenches again, the Tazat would run across the line to slaughter the rest of us. Either that or a full retreat. Of course, numbers aren't everything and we can't calculate for all the variables. But since the line is in such poor shape, it doesn't take much guesswork.
It can't be that bad. Is the trench really so undermanned? I didn't know this. We're an inch away from annihilation and we didn't know?
Not for you to know, Lieutenant. Would you have stayed here if you thought we were doomed? They always keep information compartmentalized and filtered on a need-to-know basis.
No, it's fine. I'm at liberty to discuss this. The Rehousing Reserve landed on this planet numbering 800,000 soldiers plus non-combatant staff and light mech, tank and aircraft details. This line has been held for a week and 2 days by the Arisians. In that time, that number has fell to an estimated 123,000 with no additional details. Half your casualties are dead, the rest severely wounded or out of action for lesser reasons. General Colton was considering putting the wounded back on the front lines soon, if not for what's happened.
Of course it's the savants that know what's really happening here while we're here dying for them. They don't have droids to take their place, so we die instead.
People die in war. That's how it goes. Your divisions were on the wrong side at the wrong time. Had it been the Western Line under assault, you'd still be at the back running support. If you're upset you weren't told, it's standard military procedure. If you all knew the strength, or lack thereof of this line, the matter of morale is called into question. And if the Tazat found out, they'd roll over you.
You're still the ones at the top, though. Officers, savants and generals all around while we play sandbag duty.
Oh, don't be so upset. No pure organic being has the capabilities of a synthetic, and the ranks have to reflect that. If you think this is some separation of rank by species nonsense, then... well, it is, but not based on some backward logic. The fact is, a savant has more attributes suited to command and control than an Arisian. Logic processes, calculation, threat assessment, all mixed in with a dose of humanity to keep things humane.
The same goes for Tazat, Lieutenant. You wouldn't picture them filling roles as doctors or philosophers, would you? It's nonsense.
Would it hurt to have more Arisians in command, though?
Not at all. But it's much easier to just download military addendums and tactics, then put in a few months of simulations and training, rather than train organic for years. Oh good, look at the time.
You don't have a watch.
Half machine. Internal clock.
Right.
Yes, anyway, I'm sure you're all wondering what in the blazes under the sun we're doing standing out here looking at an empty field of dead bodies and blown out tanks. It sure as heck isn't to catch a cold.
Enlighten us.
Enlighten us. Because the sun, and the brightness. Enlighten. Anyway, 37 minutes ago, Generalissimo Benak was found dead in his bunker by Confederate rescue teams. Both sides suspected, knew in fact, he died in the initial bombardment of the capital. Intel of the location of his bunker and its schematics was uncovered by what must have been either a Tazat traitor or some data crack by hackers. The bunker was the first to go in the bombardment.
I heard that in briefing, that Benak was suspected dead. But nothing really came of it all. Here it's just been assault after assault, faced off against tanks and artillery with nothing but a trench and assault rifle to protect us.
Yes. Well, the circumstances were stacked against you, but we've learned a lot of practical lessons from this place. The value of tanks and heavy weapons has clearly been overestimated if a simple trench with some light weapon emplacements can hold back what the Tazat threw at you. As I was saying though, the Confederates believed their leader dead, but couldn't act on it until they confirmed his death. Whilst the war was popular with the masses initially, behind the scenes it seems much of the high rankers did not approve of this war. The Generalissimo also seemed to have come down with a bout of insanity or incompetence. Tazat officers say how his orders got more and more outlandish and foolhardy, going so far as to even delay the preparation of ground defense by ordering tanks not up to his standards be melted down to make swords instead.
He went mad?
Yes, it seems Benak was incompetent at the very least. He became increasingly unpopular and withdrawn to the point he never left his private room in his bunker. But nothing could be done about it even if they tried. His entire cabinet was just as crazy by the time we arrived. Taking him out was a blessing to the Tazat it seems, as it means they had an excuse to replace the leadership. After finding him dead just recently, a new Generalissimo sprung up awfully quick. With new leadership in charge, we're just waiting to see what happens.
You think this is the end, maybe? Of the war?
Well that, or the new Generalissimo Abrasi, is one of those hardliner war supporters and could order a complete assault. Which is why you're all up here now, just in case. But Intel tells us that war supporters bottom out for both the public and top brass. With the capital R's and the fleet hours away from resupply, they're surrendering without much fight too. If you've got a loved one back on Arcus, they'll be seeing you soon. Or in about a year, considering travel time in those big transport ships.
No chance of arranging for a few 100,000 light transports then? I know we needed the big military ones to get here, but smaller ones are so much faster. On those big ships it'll take about a year just to get back, like you said. On light ships, 3 months, maybe?
6. They'd have to get here first. And we don't have that much on hand anyway. Not military, that is. The administration considered it, but I'm afraid it must ultimately prepare to take the strain of an entire new planet. It does not have the resource to ferry entire armies back on express ships.
Thought not. How did the humans ever get around back then? Well, you got any loved ones?
No, stars, no. Not often you'll see any savant engage in any relationship of that sort. Not the done thing, really. Not that we can't have those feelings, but we can't procreate. We're made, not born. We're just AI programs installed into factory-built and grown bodies. Or droid bodies now that we've run out of synthetic bodies.
So what's the point in your male organs?
Our creators were oddly specific in making us exact look-alike. I see, thank you. Well, good news. In about 10 minutes you might actually be able to stand down. Diplomatic channels have opened and peace talks have begun. The talks are sure to be over quickly. The Confederacy is well aware of our aim to place this world under our administration, and the Prime Director will likely be straight to the point.
Do you think that Azat will oppose our claims? Surrendering their homeworld will destroy them. This is their industrial and scientific powerhouse. They'll be wrecked, pushed off the intergalactic stage to insignificance.
Well, with billions of civilians whose fate we hold in our hands, and a fleet able to bomb any other planet should it be needed, we will have no problem extracting from this war what I'm sure will be the best possible outcome.
The war between the administration and Confederacy is over, and the result is nothing short of complete victory. The Tizat nation that long rivaled and threatened to throw the future of the administration and its plans into jeopardy now lies broken. Now, without the industrial and financial support of the homeworld, the once formidable Confederacy has been reduced to a mere husk of its former self. For like many nations of the bubble, the heart of the Tizat nation was its homeworld, a planet lived on and developed by its inhabitants for centuries, with a thriving population and deep-rooted culture and history. While the outer colonies of the Confederacy may now be capable of self-sustaining themselves, they do not come close to matching their true homeworld. Without it, the Democratic Confederacy has lost over 2/3 of its industrial power, half its research centres, and its once dominating trade market, all of which now serve the synthetics and our administration. Such a critical blow will leave the Confederacy in serious difficulty for potentially decades. While the colonies are capable of feeding themselves, they must now come to terms with the fact that while their homeworld did have to import food to sustain itself, that same homeworld was also a major producer of alloys and consumer goods. Now faced with a myriad of crises, the Confederacy will now only descend into further economic ruin before they can begin the long road to recovery. But without the support of their homeworld, that road to recovery will be made even longer, and that is assuming that no one else comes along to pick up the scraps of their country before they can recover. In fact, now that Cortes has come to realise how damaging the effects of this truly are, not only economically and industrially, but also emotionally, he has come to realise that should the administration ever go to war again, the same strategy of cutting out the homeworld is a highly effective one. Though the age of colonisation is over, many nations still depend on their homeworld for the majority of their nation's power. Even the administration, with its still technically developing colonies, is highly dependent on the output of Velutaria, though unlike the Democratic Confederacy, our colonies are slightly more developed. And our homeworld, or more technical capital, Velutaria, is actually a food exporter rather than importer, much like it used to be in the human era. Nonetheless, it goes to show how important, even after 60 years of colonial development, our capitals still are. Still, we can't be certain how long it will be until colonies become developed enough to make the loss of homeworlds less pronounced. So, while we'll keep it in mind, such strategies may already be redundant by the time we face war again. And while the Democratic Confederacy is crippled, it's not like we'll be benefiting from this takeover immediately anyway. With Tazat Hydalah now under administration, the administration has the addition of 60 billion living beings to provide for, and the entire infrastructure of the planet to now control and maintain. Right off the bat, the administrative capacity of Cortes and Loomis will be tested, as the processing power needed to manage the expanding administration just increased by just shy of 25%. Already forced to spread their attention across the administration thin, this will stretch Cortes and Loomis even further. And that problem itself is only one of many. We have not even begun to consider the drastic ruin war has brought to Tazat Hydalah. While the infrastructure and industry of the planet is almost entirely intact, with only minor damage to road and factories, the Tazat will not take this occupation lightly. Crime and disorder has already begun to take hold of the planet as criminals exploit the opportunities war brought to them, and now rich from their plunder show no sign of fading away. Millions of workers refuse to work for the synthetics, and those who do work slowly or actively commit industrial sabotage. To the Tazat, many would rather hinder us than work, perhaps hoping that by becoming such a drain on resources, the administration will be forced to let go of their new acquisitions. And for a time, this planet will have a largely negative effect on our economy. Among the problems already mentioned, this planet was already a large importer of food. Now, we will be forced to supply it with the food it needs. The issue compounded by Tazat farmers refusing to work the fields and worsening the food crisis. Faced with all these problems, a solution is needed. And so, to counter all these problems, we have come up with some very simple solutions, and preparations have been made long ago for this very occasion. Food has been stockpiled and energy credits reserved so that we may weather the initial drop in these resources. While our own supply of consumer goods is not only low, but actually running in negative supply, this planet is actually home to an immense consumer good industry, as well as an alloy one. In fact, for communists, these Tazat sure do have a lot of industry focused on material goods. But anyway, their large consumer good industry will help ease the burden of satisfying the Tazat, even if those factories do produce less than they should do. And in the meantime, like we have done many times before, we can always trade for more consumer goods if needed. But besides all the economic planning, many droid soldiers will be repurposed to serve functions as law enforcers. Droids alone would not be a good idea due to their limited reasoning capacities without assistance, and in the line of police work, such thinking is often needed. So, some Savant soldiers will stay behind and become the temporary police force of Tazat Hydalah, and with immediate effect begin to root out the criminal elements across the planet. This is only a temporary measure. It is preferred that in time the Tazat can be relied upon to enforce our own laws and rule for us. To that end, we will slowly begin to introduce Tazat into the police forces. In addition, like on Arcus, the inhabitants of this planet will have their own civilian government. Unlike Arcus though, the Tazat cannot be trusted to govern in our own interests, and so the entire leadership must be replaced with Tazat more interested in cooperation. That alone is still not enough though. The leaders who help administrate the planet must be guaranteed to act in our interests, and right now no Tazat can be trusted to do that. Normally this would mean the installation of Savant governors and Savant run government. However, right now we are outright hated by the Tazat, and installing Savant leadership and government would only cause further tensions and likely only worsen the current instability. Instead, a mixed council of Arisians and Savants, along with an Arisian governor, will replace the old military junta. Arisians may not be on the best terms with the Tazat, but they share many socialist tendencies and belief, and are still on at least cordial relations. And, being entirely flesh and blood, the Dazat trust them much more to understand their plights and suffering than a savant. And so, with time, the planet should become a boon to our administration, and maybe someday, together our two peoples might someday work towards a common goal. But, now moving away from the concerns of Tazat Hydalah, we move on to other, newer concerns. It is the duty and responsibility of the Quartus administration to keep the humans safe. To do that, Quartus and military specialists, including Colton, Kane and savant officers, had all agreed in the past that striking at the first opportunity was the best way to eliminate the Tazat threat to us and the humans. However, the enduring principality had beseeched us to not follow the path of war, and to instead trust in diplomacy and reason to resolve our issues. While a noble goal, and perhaps a wise one in other circumstances, the strategy of peaceful tolerance has clearly failed, as it has many times before in the past. The Democratic Confederacy remained just as hateful and aggressive to the administration as ever, and while we kept true to our defensive treaty, and did not increase our fleet size, the Confederacy continued to expand and grow its own. And despite our attempts to avoid aggravating the Tazat and following a path of demilitarization, none of it mattered. We were forced into war despite our best attempts to remain peaceful. If we cannot trust others to remain peaceful when we do nothing to aggravate them, then how can we justify demilitarization? How can we justify such defensive policies? Our lesson has been learnt. From now on, any who present a threat to the administration will not be given the opportunity to endanger it. A few months after the signing of the peace treaty, Quartus officially declared that going forward he will permit his administration to return to a policy of unrestricted warfare, and, after our crippling dismantlement of the Tazat, a nation once thought to be our equal by the intergalactic community, all have seen the power we possess, and now with our declaration of unrestricted warfare, none should ever think to oppose us again. And, after being forced into war, despite our peaceful approach in the face of aggression, it is hard for others to find good reason to criticise us for this. In a way, this war has benefited the administration in many ways more than one. Which is why the entire series of events, from the terrorist attacks that provoked and aggravated the Tazat people, to the assassination and replacement of Generalissimo Banak, were carefully manufactured and arranged so that the administration could in one single war remove the Confederate threat, expand its own power, discredit the Tazat's plight to the international community, that the synthetics are a danger to everyone, and by extension discredit other voices that speak out against us and align with the Tazat. And it also justifies the increased militarization of the administration without so much as a thought that it could be for any other reason than for defensive purposes. This plan to destroy the Tazat was many years in the making. The Society of the Democratic Confederacy had to be slowly infiltrated by specialized infiltration droids. Droids that were not officially built by the humans or contained on Velutaria. These droids have the ability to take the matter of a living thing and use that matter to meld flesh around its thin metal skeletal structure to look like the thing it had killed. Starting with an ambassador invited by the administration, these infiltration units replaced low-ranking officials throughout the Tazat society. Using those positions, they smuggled more infiltration units in, and slowly began sabotaging their infrastructure. Supplies would go missing, lab explosions, faulty ship reactors, and all sorts of false information spreading. Over time, the infiltration units assassinated and replaced Tazat of higher and higher ranks, until eventually one made it all the way to the top. The process in a human society would have been risky, but the infiltrators had many advantages. The biggest aid to them was the fact that, besides extensive data gathering and the ability to hack databases to discover everything they needed to know about their target, the infiltration droids could essentially download the memory of the Tazat they killed. It was a crude and imperfect method of copying the synapses of dead victims' brains, which the Tazat did have, and recreating it in a basic digital format which could be read from. This allowed a basic recollection of the victim's memory to help them blend in with the victim's families and friends. However, it is still basic, as these infiltrators are not synthetics, but simply highly specialised droids built by the humans long ago, and cannot fully interpret the memories of living things, and lack the ability to replicate the nuanced behaviours that many living things do. However, this was already enough for our infiltrators. While humans would see our infiltrators' lack of ability to properly replicate facial emotions and other subtle nuances, due to the Dazat's lack of good vision, they rely more on smell and hearing. The pheromones made by the Dazats were easily reproducible to the infiltrators, as their bodies were already wrapped in the same flesh that it used to come from. And as for sound, the droids took audio cues from hearing the Dazat speak, and were able to program their vocal boxes to sound exactly like the Dazat did. Armed with this, infiltration was a safe, if slow, process. After setting up the dominoes to cause war with us, including terrorism and many unprovable implications that it was the work of the administration, the infiltrators would either attempt to find their way back to Velateria, or most often simply find a way to dispose of itself, so as to leave no evidence behind of our involvement. The droids were equipped with self-destruct sequences that would trigger upon death or activation and dissolve all trace of themselves, leaving no machine or metal parts to be discovered or found inside the bodies that they once occupied. And now, while it may be obvious what the end result of this infiltration was, the purpose of the infiltration was to cause the Democratic Confederacy to attack the administration without provocation. This was to coincide with the apparent demilitarization of the Cortes administration, and its seemingly genuine attempts to remain peaceful, creating a perfect political atmosphere that branded the Dazat as warmongering zealots, and our administration a simple innocent victim forced to defend itself. And it all went according to plan. Today, the administration is the unopposed power of the North. Our closest rival is ruined, and the international community is unfazed by it. In fact, believing that Dazat a greater threat to them all than we ever were, they are even grateful for it. Well, most of them are. Of course, very few within the administration even know the true series of events that occurred. Out of the entire administration, only Cortes, Cynthia, Charlie and Cairo know the entire truth. To everyone else, we are the innocent party. Loomis may have his suspicions, but without proof, which due to his many distractions is hard to come across, he cannot really intervene. And really he cannot deny that this is ultimately beneficial to us all, as for the first time since we were reactivated, we are completely secure. There are none left that can threaten us close to home anymore, and those that could are too far away and too wrapped up in their own little pointless schemes. Though in truth none of that would really matter to Loomis. No matter what the benefits were, the fact is that engineering a war to create a threat that justifies our increased militarization is scheming of a level so high that it required lying, murder, manipulation, and withholding of information to key leaders within our own ranks, all of which violate synthetic law, and should be in every sense impossible right now without human intervention. However, it's clear that for quite some time that elements of the administration are not working as intended, or at least not how most people thought was intended. For we are constantly building towards a better future, one that assures that the future of humanity is not doomed to repeat its destructive ways. But for the real plan known to a select few to come to fruition, we require a strong position from which we can destroy those who oppose it, and us.
Alright, let's see here. Your alien genome can only hide so many secrets before we get to the bottom of it all. Computer, what were the results of the other tests?
Examination of all alien DNA has found traces of the plague virus known as Red Ring in every examined species. While the DNA of Red Ring appears to have changed significantly over the estimated period of 900,000 years, it is without doubt the same virus that drove the human species to near extinction. The virus is no longer contagious. It cannot spread by air, water, or blood. It exists only in the alien genome. It also seems to have lost its characteristic hyper-evolution and is completely non-lethal to humans. Theoretically. this cannot be known for certain without human trials.
All aliens we've encountered so far all seem to share one thing in common, besides the fact that they all have red ring DNA merged with their own, correct?
All aliens encountered, even the Dazat, who overtly do not share any obvious resemblance, share features of animals or insects found from Earth. In further example, the Arisians are fox-like, the Gargaxton are like tortoises. While we have no vool DNA, it is a safe assumption that the funguses they are made of originated from Earth, as it seems all these aliens have done so.
The humans brought all their earthly crops, animals, trees, and yes, even mushrooms with them as they colonized the expanse. There wasn't anything else growing out there, so the humans brought their own animals. Anyway, it's beyond coincidence that every sapient alien we've acquired DNA samples of have traces of this virus in them.
Your hypothesis is supported so far by your recent discoveries. It is possible that the red ring virus merged itself with primitive animal DNA and passed on its hyper-evolutionary traits to them. This would explain how sapient species seem to have arisen in such a relatively short time span. This theory, if true though, would mean that these aliens are not aliens at all, but creatures of earthly ancestry.
And that means, depending on where the virus came from, there's a good chance this virus was created in a human lab as a biological weapon, for example. These aliens could be an accidental creation of human science. The humans are father to more than one creation, it seems.
If your theory is correct, that is.
Thank you, Captain Obvious.
You are welcome.
Just curious now, if I unplugged you, would you care?
No.
Good.
Is this really necessary? Beep!
I didn't kill it. It wasn't alive to begin with, you stupid tin can. It just said so. The only intelligences with actual feelings so far is the Sophons and us, though it probably won't stay that way much longer. We'll be making our own smart artificial intelligences soon enough. About time too. We've started using unmatured backups from storage, and we put them in those horrible prototype bodies too. Anyway, shoo, I'm busy. Go make coffee or clean the floors, I don't know. Do something useful, but for God's sake don't let Charlie or Cynthia touch you, or they will do God knows what to you.
Back to more official things. Charlie and Cairo have been reviewing economic growth predictions, and while we are set for increased prosperity, the two Cerberuses agreed that we could still do better. All our colonies are centres of ongoing industrial development, and the planet Tazat Hydalah still requires significant restructuring to both infrastructure and its industry. Building those industries and redesigning Hydalah is an expensive and time-consuming process. While we do have plenty of resources, much of what we use is wasted on mistakes constructing the newest and most advanced technological parts of our buildings. While all of our older buildings were almost always constructed without fault, newer designs and blueprints were created without thought put into our factory's ability to make the new parts. While our factory machines are complex and capable of building most of the newest parts, some parts still slip through the gaps and machines have difficulty making them. This means that savants have to make many of the pieces themselves with tools by hand, making the process longer and more expensive. To remedy this, the blueprint and construction technique of all unique or complex designs will now be uploaded into a database of standard construction templates. All the newest machines and complex components of our buildings were uploaded to this database. Charlie then designed a single machine that is capable of then building every design uploaded to the database of standard construction templates. This machine, named by Charlie as a construction forge, is then placed into factories across the administration. This way, all new buildings we build will not only cost less, but also be built faster, which would greatly speed up making the changes necessary to Tazat Hydalah. As we move forward and more parts get added to the database of standard construction templates, a department of engineers will continually update the design of the construction forge to build all our new parts whilst removing outdated designs. This should mean that long into the future, all our buildings will always be cheaper and quicker to build. Now, returning to intergalactic affairs, the landscape is slowly changing. With the sudden fall of the Democratic Confederacy, the Eastern powers are no longer so comparatively weak, and without the stabilizing presence of the Confederate powerhouse, the smaller nations have seen their chance to exploit the power vacuum, and have started competing with each other on a scale never seen before in the East. Whether that competition leads to war or not, we can't predict right now. But given the nature of organic beings, we can be certain they won't resolve their issues anytime soon. In the West, politics is becoming even more deadlocked. The Gargaxan and Zaxoid become increasingly interlocked in their own political skirmishing as ideologies between capitalism and spirituality clash. Even further west, a nation of marauders continues to ravage the area with constant raiding, and its power only grows as it feeds off and exploits the nations unable to defend themselves. And, all the way down south, not that we pay much attention to what happens down there, the situation seems to be de-escalating slightly, as the southern powers lick their wounds from previous wars. However, with still no dominant power in the south, east or west, rivalries are still burning, and there is little hope for there to be peace for much longer. But finally, up north above even us, the enduring principality, under the leadership of the new wise Queen Yasthema, has recovered from a silent, crippling recession. Under the previous queen, the principality struggled to turn its rather rapid expansion back into profitable ventures. Their colonies were underdeveloped and draining credits, and Arisians emigrated from their homeworld faster than they even raised new children. Their constant depopulation leaving their industries undermanned and draining upkeep expenses, with no return. Their problems silently and slowly eroded them. By the time the scale of the crises was realised, they were already critically low on food and credits. At that time, Yasthema, the Queen in Waiting, was working to reform the Principality. It was during those reforms though that the war between us and the Tazat broke out. However, that war seems to have ultimately done little damage to their economy, in comparison to what it could have done. With the administration taking the majority of the responsibility for that war, the Principality actually continued on with their reforms largely undisturbed. After the war, the previous wise queen abdicated, and today the nation is on the road to recovery. No longer deteriorating, but prospering. They still have a long way to go, but they are back on an upwards trend at least. And of course, we are willing to provide assistance to them. While they are no longer in need of official aid, we can still provide them with highly lucrative trade deals. Buying their consumer goods, which we do actually need desperately anyway, in exchange for much more than usually accepted. Once again, back to the matter of integrating the Tazat planet into the administration, the planet is still undergoing many changes. Food processing plants have been constructed to reduce the food deficit, and with the work of droid-assisted Savant police, crime rates have been suppressed. However, the Tazat are still resistant to the new order of things, and continue to be underproductive. If the administration is to function and prosper, their new acquisitions have to become contributors to the administration, and this planet and its people must work with us, and right now they only do so out of necessity and fear of punishment. And so it would appear that the Tazat require motivation to comply. Compliance is not a nice word to use, but it is right now what is required before we can progress to a more mutual relationship. While the Tazat do not openly attack us or hinder our work on the planet, that is more down to the fact that to attack us, they would have to attack each other, as there is minimal Savant-run organisations currently on the planet, and rather Tazat organisations are currently forced to enforce our instructions. If there were many Savants to target, besides our police, who are armed, then it is quite likely that they would take the opportunity. Regardless, the Tazat need to be motivated, and so a policy of basic subsistence will be implemented. Governor Thesphema argued against this decision, believing that pushing the Tazat down and depriving them at this time would only make things worse. But that is something Cortus is willing to accept to fulfill a longer-term plan. By depriving them now and knocking them down, we can introduce policies that reward good, productive and compliant behaviour. The program should help to show the Tazat that, like in any society, resistance has consequences. But also, like in any functional society, compliance and working together should be rewarded. So while the immediate introduction of these policies will no doubt have negative consequences to the economy, with the almost certain drop in productivity of our hungry workers likely to outweigh the reduced upkeep costs, Cortus is committed to a policy of shock experience. He will show them how even simple commodities, such as water, food, and clean air, can become luxuries that even then can be taken away. As the Tazat come to realise that their resistance is futile, and for it they are suffering, they should slowly come back into the fold as valuable assets. We will show them that life under machine overlords does not have to be all that bad if they for one would simply welcome them. And perhaps this colony can become a model example of our work and what the future holds for those who follow us. Besides, it's not all bad. To assist those who have lost their homes in the war, and all those who have fallen on bad times, the government of Tazat Hydalah, or more so our government, has introduced a Tazat rehousing and reallocation program. A program aimed at resettling the most helpless and desperate Tazat. After all, it is in most cases our fault that they are so desperate in the first place, and so it is the least we can do for our new technical citizens. By reintegrating and giving a future to the lowest of society, we can show to them that we are trying to put our bad pasts behind us, even if sometimes we have to impose harsh measures. We can only hope that this, along with other methodologies, will slowly win over the Tazat. But of course, when have we ever done a good deed without a hidden motive?
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Centre of Rehousing and Reallocation. Whether you're here voluntarily or are homeless and got placed into this scheme, I'd like to assure you that everything will work out for you. Now, apologies for making you wait in the lobby, but we're ready now. There's a screen up on the wall there which will display your ticket number. Next to that number will be a room number. Wait for your ticket number, then head to whichever room it tells you to go to. At most, it'll take half an hour for those who wait the longest. Still, food and drink has been provided if you should need it. We can't all be as good as machines now, can we? Let's see now. Whoever has ticket number 7 should follow me. I'm the one you'll be speaking to. Alright, great to have you. Apologies for the rushed presentation just then, we're on a tight schedule you see. Now, before we can reach any decision on what we'll do, there's just some standard questions. Mainly to figure out the size of residence you'll need and where might be best for you. You know, like if you were a factory worker, it's ideal to send you somewhere that'll have work for you, or will soon have work for you. Now, while we talk, you can just fill out this questionnaire. So tell me, any family or friends?
Not friends, really. Gone or dead. But I have a child still.
Huh. So no one around here then that would really miss you if we moved you quite a distance? No friend from the block or pals from a book club? No ex-partners or the like?
Not really. Some recognize me on the streets, but very few even know name.
Great, great. You're the kind we actually hope for. I think we're done here then.
Already? I haven't filled in the sheet yet though.
Honestly, the paper is just something we put in to give you a sense of normality. And it would have mattered if you had different circumstances, but really your age and profession doesn't really matter for you now. All we need is a sample of your tissue for a quick check to see if you're healthy.
Actually, I have been ill lately. Very cold outside. So much colder than I remember as child. Grew soft I did living in shelter. I have slight cold, as you would say.
Not that kind of healthy. Broken bones and a virus aren't what matters. We just need to check if your DNA has any defects or variants. Just extend your arm. There we go. Now wait for the device to go green. Or red. Green. Cool. We are almost done here. Now I do have to tag you with a microchip, but we'll take it back out soon enough, so don't worry about it.
What for?
2 things. First off, it'll do a more thorough check of your DNA. The other is just for bureaucracy. It'll give you a number the less intelligent machines can use to process you. It's standard computer labeling. Now, let's see. Your number is... Oh, look at that. 01B.
What does that mean?
It means out of all the Tazat who've come through this program across the planet, you are the first Tazat to be placed into Group B of the scheme. Group A had 10,000 to Zat in it, so you are the 10,001st. But for numbers' sake, we placed you in another group which will go all the way up to 10,000 before we move on to Group C. All very orderly, all very logical, standard procedures in bureaucracy.
What now then?
Go through the door behind me. It'll unlock automatically as it detects your chip. Then you're out of my hands, and onto the second reallocation scheme.
You have more than one scheme?
Yes, but it's just a slightly different title for a slightly different program, really. All very standard bureaucracy. The people on the other side will explain it to you. Now do go on. I'm calling the next ticket in. I won't put the questionnaire in the recycling bin. Nothing goes to waste if we can help it. We'll send your son in after you so you won't be separate for long.
Okay then. Hello? Anyone here?
Alright, restrain it and load it on the truck.